more than 2,000 years, these ruins remained undiscovered. For centuries, the only people who saw these remains were occasional nomads who camped near here.
We archaeologists often find more information than we originally hoped for. This is exactly what happened in the Middle East. In the 1850s, when archaeologists first came to Iraq, or as it was called then, Mesopotamia, they were looking for the biblical city, Babylon, but they uncovered even older civilizations. The digging started here, in the Fertile Crescent. The land between the rivers looked promising because of the possibilities for irrigation agriculture. Archaeologists knew that early civilizations grew along the banks of major rivers. Here, it was the Tigris and Euphrates.
These rivers were fed by waters from the mountains to the north. Not far from here, ancient cities have been discovered. Around 2700 BC, they were populated by Sumerians. In this area, archaeologists have found proof that cereal agriculture was the basis of that civilization. Irrigated fields produced a dependable food supply for Sumerians. They dug ditches and brought river water to their dry lands, the first step toward large-scale farming. Farmers have been irrigating this area for nearly 5,000 years. Canal systems crisscross the whole land. The Sumerians turned the desert into a fertile delta. With an abundant food supply, the population grew, with Sumer divided into several city-states. This pattern was quite different from Egypt, which at the same time was developing into a unified country. We think about 200,000 people lived in a typical Sumerian city-state. The temple was the center of Sumerian city life. At Ur, archaeologists uncovered another temple called a ziggurat. Each city-state was organized around the worship of the deity whose home was the temple.
I remember thinking what great shape the Sumerians had to be in. It was a long way up to the high platform, but when I reached the top, I could see the ruins of the entire city. To the right, the river, not far from where it empties into the harbor. In ancient times, merchants sailed the river, trading goods, some going as far as India. They also used wagons for transportation, which brings us to the wheel, one of the Sumerians' greatest contributions to the Western world. If you doubt its importance, just take a look around. This is a photograph at the excavation site of another ancient city not far from Ur. All of the various pots and jars and bowls were found in just one home. The Sumerians were among the first people to use the wheel in pottery making. Craftsmen were probably specialized. Some made pottery, others made statues.
These figurines were placed in the temples. They give us an indication of how the Sumerians dressed and what they looked like. Some cities even had toy manufacturers. Working with clay, the Sumerians produced toys that resemble some of ours. Only the most skilled and gifted people were allowed to work in silver and bronze.
Since precious metals aren't found in Mesopotamia, the silver in this bracelet probably came from northeastern Asia Minor. Although the Sumerians traded for certain materials, they relied on clay to make most things. Mud and sun were about the only resources they had. Even in Iraq today, some homes are made with clay bricks.
The Sumerians also developed the principle of the arch. This method of spanning and opening in a wall was the Sumerian contribution to architecture. Since 2500 BC, the arch has been essential in the building of bridges and temples. Perhaps the most important use of clay was in the development of writing. Writing was first used as a way of keeping track of business in the temples. More than half of all ancient history was recorded on clay tablets, and this is where it began. Cylinder seals were the first form of written communication. They were used to identify land ownership and water rights. A seal was rolled across a clay tablet, leaving an official mark. In this way, Sumerians notarized documents. These pictographs soon were replaced by cuneiform writing. But even this new method could not eliminate disputes. The cities continued to fight for centuries. By 2300 BC, a people called the Semites had become dominant in the land of the Sumerians.
By 1900 BC, Sumerians had been absorbed into the Semitic population. Then in 1750 BC, the people became part of a politically unified empire created by the Semitic King Hammurabi. The land became known as Babylonia, with its capital at Babylon. This is King Hammurabi at his throne. Below him you can see his famous Code of Laws, which were inspired by an earlier Sumerian code. These laws were publicly displayed. Hammurabi built a powerful empire which included Mesopotamia, Syria, and part of Asia Minor. Babylonia retained its power for nearly 300 years. About 1400 BC, another people had their beginnings around the city of Assur. These were the Assyrians, who would cause the Babylonians' downfall. The Assyrians lived in the mountains north of Babylonia. They were an agricultural people, highly civilized, although their culture was less developed than the Babylonians. However, the Assyrians had something that enabled them to conquer empires. They had the horse. Can you picture thousands of warriors riding out of the mountains? Men on horseback must have been a terrifying sight to a people accustomed to fighting on foot. The Assyrians used shields and designed chariots for fighting.
The Assyrians established their capital at Nineveh and were invincible until the Chaldean Empire defeated them. Around 570 BC, it reached its height under King Nebuchadnezzar. Power shifted back to Babylon. Under the new king, Babylon became one of the most splendid cities in the world. Architectural principles developed earlier by the Sumerians reached their fullest expression. Behind these gates and through these streets, visitors saw the famed hanging gardens of Babylon. The ziggurats, the temple towers, were put to further use. From their tops, Chaldean astronomers studied the heavens.
The entire history of this Middle Eastern area is one of conquest and reconquest. To political historians, it's clear that empires in Mesopotamia rose and fell. But to archaeologists and historians interested in economic problems, there is an unanswered question. Why are these cities little more than dust today? Some believe that the Mesopotamians' method of irrigation may have gradually increased the amounts of salts present in the soil until agriculture was ruined. Without agriculture, the cities died. But ancient Mesopotamia left a foundation on which other complex cultures were built.